Old soldiers, they say, never die. They just fade away. But some things don't fade. Some things fester in the dark, in the quiet places of the earth. Some things remember the jungle, the heat, the fear, and they wait. For me, the waiting was over. The war had found its way home.
The birdsong that morning didn't welcome a new day. It seemed to mock the silence. Soft, hazy light filtered through the pines, casting long shadows across the porch of the small house. There, in his customary wooden rocking chair, sat Arthur Miller, cradling a mug of black coffee. His hand, the one that had once held a rifle with unshakable steadiness, now trembled as he brought the ceramic to his lips. The lines on his face were a road map of 80 years, each one a testament to time's relentless march. His right eye, a milky, sightless orb, was a permanent souvenir from a place of mud and monsoon rains, a place called Vietnam. His body was a museum of old wounds, scars from shrapnel, a long pale line from a captured blade. They were all there, but those were trivial. The deepest wound, the one that never scabbed over, was etched into his soul. It was a wound that bled memories. At 18, he'd been so full of fire, enlisting to join the front lines, to fight for something he believed in. But in every firefight, in every breathless moment spent hiding in the suffocating jungle, he lost pieces of himself along with his brothers in arms. Now, in the twilight of his life, those memories were his most constant companions.
Every morning was the same ritual. The chair, the coffee, the bittersweet pilgrimage back to that haunted past. It was a strange cocktail of torment and pride. The medals for valor, tarnished with age, still hung on the green fatigue jacket in his closet, a silent testament to the hell he had walked through for his country. He was lost in that distant haze when a voice pulled him back. "Dad, you want some breakfast?" Arthur blinked, the ghosts of the jungle receding. He turned his head slowly. "What was that, David?" His son, David, leaned against the doorframe, a frown creasing his brow. "Dad, I've been calling you for a minute. You aren't answering. You okay?" A faint, wry smile touched Arthur's lips. "Just visiting old friends, old times." "Yeah, well, you visit them every day," David said, his tone a mixture of affection and exasperation. "I know that story by heart." Arthur chuckled, a dry, rasping sound. "So, what did you ask me?" "I asked if you've eaten. Mom's not back from her sister's yet." "Just this coffee. Figured I'd wait." "Don't be ridiculous. Come on, I'll drive you down to the diner. Get some real food in you." All right, Arthur grumbled. "Is Leo with you?" David shook his head. "Nah, he's got school today. It's just me. Now, are you coming or do I have to drag you?" "Hold your horses." With a groan, Arthur pushed himself up, his old joints protesting. He shuffled inside, grabbing his old faded boonie hat from the hook by the door, and followed his son out to the pickup truck. The diner was warm and smelled of bacon and coffee. They were halfway through their plates of eggs and toast when Arthur froze, his fork hovering mid-air. His gaze was fixed on the street outside. A young man, clearly a tourist or a hiker from the look of his large backpack, was walking past. To David, he was just another face. To Arthur, whose instincts had been honed by years of life or death vigilance, something felt wrong. The man carried himself with a strange, predatory stillness. A chill, cold and unwelcome, snaked down Arthur's spine. He followed the man with his good eye until he disappeared down the street. David noticed his father's unnerving focus. "Dad? What are you staring at?" Arthur gestured with his chin towards the street. "That fella. The one with the backpack. Something's not right about him." David craned his neck, looking out the window. The street was empty now, save for a few familiar town cars. He chuckled. "What are you talking about? There's no one there." "He's gone now," Arthur muttered, poking at his eggs. "You look too late." "I see a cloud. I see the storm coming." David just shook his head with a confused smile and went back to his food. But Arthur couldn't eat. He pushed his plate aside, his appetite gone, replaced by a familiar, metallic taste of unease. He scanned the familiar diner, the quiet street, the whole world suddenly feeling off kilter.
Then he saw it. Across the street, standing near the town's war memorial, was a man about his age. He was wearing an old field jacket, and on his shoulder was a familiar-looking military surplus backpack. The man caught Arthur's eye, and a slow, knowing smile spread across his face. He raised a hand in a crisp, clean salute. A wave of unexpected warmth washed over Arthur. He felt a smile, a real one, tug at his own lips as he returned the gesture. To meet someone who spoke the same silent language, who understood the weight of the years and the memories, it was a rare and profound comfort. David looked up, his mouth full of toast. "Who are you saluting?" "Saw an old-timer," Arthur said, his voice lighter than it had been all morning. "Another vet from my time. Looked like he was still in good shape, too. Had one of those old Alice packs on his back." David smiled, though a flicker of doubt crossed his face. He figured his father was just seeing what he wanted to see.
After breakfast, David drove his father home. The unease from earlier had subsided, replaced by the pleasant glow of that shared moment of camaraderie. His wife, Helen, was still not back. Arthur settled back into his rocking chair on the porch, content to just sit and drink his tea, the world feeling a little less lonely. He was watching the road, a quiet, empty ribbon of asphalt winding through the trees, when a figure appeared in the distance. As the figure drew closer, Arthur recognized him immediately. It was the man from the diner, the fellow veteran.
The man stopped at his front gate. "Afternoon," he called out, his voice friendly. Arthur felt a jolt of pleasure. "Hey there, come on in," he shouted back, gesturing to the empty chair beside him. The man walked up the path and sat down, placing his heavy backpack on the wooden planks with a weary sigh. "Whew, this thing gets heavier every year." Arthur poured him a glass of iced tea from the pitcher on the small table between them. "What you got in there? Rocks?" he asked, his curiosity piqued. The man chuckled. "Just some personal gear, looking for a place to stay around here." He took the glass. "So, what's your name? I'd bet a month's pay you and I served in the same hellhole." "Arthur Miller, and you'd win that bet. U.S. Army, 1st Cavalry Division." "Charlie Hemlock," the man said, his eyes lighting up. "Infantry? Lord, it's a small world. You settled down here for good?" "Got a wife, one son, and a grandson to carry on the name," Arthur said with a swell of pride. "How about you, Charlie?" "2 kids of my own," Charlie said, his gaze turning distant. "They're waiting for me back home." He downed the rest of his tea, then stood and shouldered his pack. "Well, Arthur, I've got to be going. Another time, maybe we can swap war stories." "Any time, Charlie. Stay safe out there." "You too," Charlie said. They shook hands, a firm, solid grip that spoke volumes. "Let's talk about the old days again soon, the glorious ones."
As Charlie walked away, Helen's car finally pulled into the driveway. She got out, carrying grocery bags, looking tired but content. "What took you so long?" Arthur teased. "I was about to send out a search party." Helen, 10 years his junior and still full of vigor, just rolled her eyes. "Oh, hush. My sister wouldn't let me leave, and then I ran into the ladies from the church group. You know how it is." She bustled past him into the kitchen.
She reappeared a moment later, pouring herself a glass of tea. "You look hungry. I'll get lunch started," she said, then paused, looking at him. "You're in a good mood. What happened?" "Met a friend today," Arthur said, a genuine smile on his face. "An old soldier. We talked for a bit. Felt good. Reminded me of the old times." "Well, I'm glad," she said, her expression softening. "It's better than seeing you with that long face all day. Makes me feel old." "You're beautiful as ever," he grumbled. She laughed. "Tell me that again when dinner's ready." She turned to go back to the kitchen. "Oh, did David stop by? Is Leo coming this weekend?" Arthur grunted. "You were too busy gossiping to even think about your own family, and now you ask me? Hey, I'm retired. I've earned the right to gossip," she retorted, feigning indignation before disappearing back into the house. Arthur just shook his head and took another sip of tea.
Later, as they sat at the dinner table, Helen looked at him curiously. "Something's got you smiling from ear to ear. What's the secret?" "Just happy, that's all. Talking to that fella today, it brought back a lot. Made me feel alive, you know?" He paused, his tone growing more somber. "Makes a man think. If I were to go tomorrow, you'd tell David to live a good life, right?" Helen put her fork down, her expression hardening. "Stop that. Don't you dare talk like that. You wash your mouth out. Think before you speak." Arthur just chuckled sadly. "I'm just saying what's true." "Well, don't," she snapped. "Not at the dinner table, not ever."
He sighed and bowed his head to eat. He'd only taken a few bites when a commotion erupted from outside. Shouts, panicked voices, the sound of people running.
"What in the world?"
Helen said. Arthur stood up and went to the door, Helen right behind him. Down the road, a crowd of neighbors was rushing towards the riverbank. Arthur called out to a young boy he recognized. "Hey, Billy, what's going on?" The boy, out of breath, stopped. "Mr. Miller, it's the Johnson kids, Danny and Sue. They say they fell in the river. They're drowned."
The words hit Arthur like a physical blow. "They found them yet?" "No, sir, not yet. Everyone's heading down there to look." Arthur's face was grim. "Damn it all." He turned to his wife. "Helen, you go back inside. I'm going to go see what's what. I'll eat later." "Arthur, be careful," she called after him. "Billy," Arthur said to the boy, "you walk with me. My old legs can't keep up with you kids." The boy smiled. "Yes, sir, Mr. Miller." Together, the old soldier and the young boy walked down to the river toward the sounds of tragedy. The air by the river was thick with the scent of wet earth and rising panic. As Arthur approached, the murmur of the crowd resolved into distinct sounds, the raw, keening sobs of a woman, the low, urgent commands of men, and the ceaseless, indifferent rush of the water. He pushed through the onlookers, his movements slow but deliberate, a small, solid rock in a stream of hysteria. The setting sun painted the sky in angry shades of orange and purple, making the dark water of the creek look like a pool of ink.
He saw Martha Johnson, the mother of the 2 children, collapse against her husband, her cries swallowed by the fabric of his shirt. Arthur's heart, a tough, scarred old muscle, ached for her. He knew that sound. It was the sound of a world ending. He averted his gaze and sought out the man in charge. Sheriff Thompson, a good man not yet 40, stood by his patrol car, a clipboard in hand, his face a mask of grim professionalism. Arthur came to a stop beside him. "What's the situation, Bill?"
Thompson looked up, his eyes tired. "Art, it's a bad one." He gestured with his pen towards the water, where a dozen men were wading, their flashlights cutting useless beams into the murky depths. "We've been dragging the bottom for the last hour, from the bend up there downstream. Found nothing, not a shoe, not a piece of clothing." He lowered his voice. "The current's faster than it looks. If they went in up there, God only knows where they are now." Arthur scanned the river with his good eye. He wasn't seeing it as a place for a summer swim. He was seeing terrain. He saw the eddies, the undertow near the fallen oak, the way the water deepened abruptly past the big rock. "This time of year, after the rains, the current's always treacherous," he said, more to himself than to the sheriff. "You think they drifted far?" Thompson shook his head, the gesture heavy with futility. "I don't know, Art. I just don't know. We'll keep looking till it's pitch black, but..." He didn't need to finish.
They stayed and watched as the light faded completely. The search continued for another 3 hours, the flashlights growing weaker, the men's movements slower. Finally, a bone-weary exhaustion settled over the group. One by one they trudged out of the cold water, their bodies shivering, their faces pale and defeated in the harsh glare of the patrol car's headlights. Sheriff Thompson knew it was hopeless, for tonight at least. He walked over to the Johnson family, his boots squelching in the mud, and spoke to them in a low, gentle voice. There was nothing more that could be done in the dark.
Arthur had Billy, the young boy, walk him home. He didn't say a word the whole way. Back on his porch, he sank into his rocking chair. The familiar comfort it usually offered was gone, replaced by a cold dread. He picked up his glass of iced tea, but the ice had long since melted. It was just tepid water now. He let out a long, slow breath. His wife, Helen, hadn't returned. The house was dark and silent. The night pressed in, heavy and suffocating. The air grew still, the chirping of crickets fading into an unnerving quiet. The single bulb above his head, usually a steady beacon of white light, began to flicker. It buzzed and sputtered, casting the porch in a strobing, disorienting dance of light and shadow. Arthur looked up at it, annoyed. Then the night deepened. The darkness felt absolute, a living presence. And from the deepest shadows by the property line, a figure resolved itself from the gloom. 2 figures. No, they were indistinct, hazy. He squinted, his heart beginning to hammer against his ribs. It was a man. He saw him clearly now, standing just beyond the fence. The flickering light caught him for a second. It was Charlie. The man raised a hand, not in a wave, but in a gesture to come closer. "Arthur." The voice was not a sound that traveled through the air, but one that seemed to assemble itself directly inside Arthur's head, like static over a long-dead radio frequency. "Come here. There's something you need to know." Arthur stood, his body moving on instinct. He walked to the edge of the porch steps. "Charlie? What is this? What are you doing here?" Charlie pointed a spectral finger in the direction of the river. "Those 2 kids, they didn't just fall in. I know where they are, and you have to be the one to find them." The world seemed to tilt beneath Arthur's feet. "What are you talking about? How could you know?" "We don't have time for a lot of questions," the static voice insisted. "You need to listen. You need to do exactly as I say. You need to prepare some things."
A cold knot of fear and disbelief tightened in Arthur's stomach, but the urgency in that strange voice was undeniable. "What things?" "Go inside. Get 2 cups of uncooked rice and put it in a plastic bag. Then, from your fireplace, get a handful of cold ash. You'll also need incense, about 10 sticks. Can you get these things?" Arthur stared at the figure, his rational mind screaming that this was impossible, a grief-induced hallucination. But his soldier's intuition, the part of him that had survived ambushes and firefights, told him this was real. "Yeah," he whispered. "Yeah, I can get them. Wait here."
He moved through his own dark house like an intruder. He found the rice in the pantry, his hands fumbling in the dark. He knelt at the hearth, the cold scent of old fires filling his nostrils as he scooped a handful of gray ash into a small paper sack. The incense was in a drawer in the living room, a sandalwood scent Helen sometimes liked. He took a dozen sticks. His hands were shaking again, but not from age. This was fear. This was the unknown.
He returned to the porch. Charlie was still there, a patient, unnerving statue in the night. Arthur handed him the bag of supplies. "Now what?" he whispered, his voice hoarse. "Now," Charlie said, his form already turning back toward the path, "we go to the river." He didn't know if Charlie had come to the riverbank earlier that day, but the ghost moved with an eerie certainty, leading him through the woods not to the chaotic trampled area where the search party had been, but to a quiet, secluded bend upstream. The moon was hidden by thick clouds, and the only light was the weak beam from Arthur's flashlight.
Charlie stopped at the water's edge. "Give me the bag," he commanded. Arthur watched, mesmerized, as the ghostly figure took the bag of rice and poured it in a careful line along the muddy bank. Then he took 9 of the incense sticks and planted them in the soft earth, forming a circle around a small patch of ground. Each stick was about a hand span from the next. Charlie pulled a book of matches from his pocket, but as he struck one, the flame hissed and died instantly. He tried again, and again. The matches wouldn't light. Arthur fumbled in his own pocket and produced an old Zippo lighter. "Here, use this."
Charlie took the lighter. He looked at his own useless matchbook, then tossed it into the river. Arthur braced for the splash, but there was none. The matchbook vanished into the black surface without a sound, without a ripple. A profound, unnatural silence hung over the water. Only the faint shimmering of a few small fish broke the stillness.
With the Zippo, Charlie lit the 9 sticks of incense. White smoke curled into the air, twisting into strange, unnatural shapes instead of dissipating. He took the last stick, the 10th one, and lit it. But then he did something strange. He turned it upside down, extinguishing the flame, and planted the smoldering, incense-coated end into the small pile of fireplace ash he'd made in the center of the circle. He began to murmur something, words too low and too strange for Arthur to comprehend.
The instant Charlie's murmuring stopped, the river, which had been as still as glass, erupted. A pillar of water shot 6 feet into the air, as if from a death charge. As the water crashed back down, a shape, pale and horribly still, bobbed to the surface. It was the body of a child. Charlie pointed. There, his static-laced voice was grim. "One floats, one sinks. Go get the sheriff. Tell them to bring them up." Arthur stared, his blood running cold. He nodded dumbly, then turned and ran, his old legs finding a strength he hadn't felt in decades. He was no longer just a tired old man. He was a messenger, running from a world of ghosts back into the world of the living. Arthur ran.
He didn't know where the strength came from, but his legs pumped, his lungs burned, and the night air whipped past his face. The beam of his flashlight bobbed crazily, illuminating patches of damp asphalt and encroaching trees. He burst out of the woods and back onto the main road where the remnants of the search party were packing up. "Sheriff!" he yelled, his voice a ragged gasp. "Sheriff Thompson!"
Thompson and his deputies turned, startled. "Art, what is it? What's wrong?" "The kids," Arthur panted, leaning on his knees to catch his breath. "I found them, upstream, round the bend." The sheriff's professional calm gave way to stunned disbelief. "You what? How?" Arthur straightened up, his mind racing for a plausible lie. I had a hunch, followed the current. They're snagged in the reeds over there." He pointed back into the darkness. "We have to go now." Though skepticism was written all over his face, Thompson couldn't ignore the certainty in the old soldier's eyes. "All right, boys, let's move. Grab the gear."
The weary team reassembled, a grim procession following Arthur back to the haunted bend in the river. When they arrived, the first body was still there, a pale, heartbreaking shape floating amongst the lily pads. A collective gasp went through the men. The parents' agonized cries echoed in their minds. "All right," Thompson said, his voice thick with emotion. "Let's bring her in." Two deputies waded carefully into the water. They retrieved the small body with a somber gentleness and carried it to the shore, placing it on a clean tarp. But their grim task was only half done.
"The other one's right below her," Arthur stated, his voice flat. Two of the strongest deputies waded out to the spot. They reached down into the black water, their faces grim. One of them found a leg. "Got him," he grunted. They both took hold, ready to lift. They pulled. Nothing. The body wouldn't budge. "He's stuck," one deputy strained. "Must be caught on a root." They repositioned and pulled again, their muscles bunching. The body was like an anchor. It was as if the riverbed itself had a grip on the child. Two more men went in to help. Now 4 strong men were pulling, their feet sinking into the mud, their grunts of effort cutting through the night. The body remained immovable.
Standing on the bank, a cold realization dawned on Arthur. This wasn't natural. At that moment, the static voice returned, a whisper of wind only he could hear. "The incense, Arthur, the one you planted. Give it to them. It's the only way." Arthur turned. Charlie was standing behind him, a faint, shimmering outline against the trees, invisible to all but him. Arthur looked back at the spot where the ritual had taken place. He walked over, pulled the upside-down incense stick from the patch of ash, and strode back to the sheriff.
"Bill," he said with an authority that surprised even himself, "tell your man to take this. Have him push it into the boy's leg. Just a prick. Do it now." Sheriff Thompson stared at the strange, ash-tipped stick, then at Arthur's deadly serious face. "Art, what in God's name?" "There's no time, Bill. Just trust me." Arthur's voice was a commander's bark. Shaken, the sheriff nodded and handed the stick to his nearest deputy. "You heard him. Go try it."
The deputy, looking utterly bewildered, waded back out.
"You want me to poke the body with this?"
"Just do it!" Arthur yelled from the shore. The deputy shrugged, leans down, and jabbed the stick into the submerged leg. The effect was instantaneous and horrifying. The body, which moments before had resisted the strength of 4 men, shot to the surface as if propelled by a powerful spring. It floated serenely, freed from its unseen anchor. The 6 men in the water stared, their mouths agape, speechless with a primal fear that went beyond the tragedy of the scene. This was wrong. This was deeply, terribly wrong. Get him to the shore, Sheriff Thompson finally croaked, his voice cracking.
They brought the second body to the shore and laid it beside his sister. The group stood in a circle, a perimeter of fear around the two small forms. The night was silent again, but the silence was now heavy, filled with questions no one dared to ask. Then Arthur heard the static whisper again. The job's not done. The rice and the ash. Put it in their mouths. A wave of nausea washed over Arthur. He fought it down. He walked over to Sheriff Thompson. Bill, one last thing. That bag of rice and ash I had, we need to put a pinch in each of their mouths. The sheriff looked at him as if he'd lost his mind. Art, that's enough. This is a crime scene now. We can't... It's to keep them at peace, Arthur lied, the words tasting like ash in his own mouth. It's an old way, a country thing, for respect. Please, Bill. Thompson looked at the two small sheet-covered bodies, then back at the old veteran who had somehow led them here. He sighed, defeated by the strangeness of the night. He nodded to one of his deputies. The deputy, trembling, knelt. He took a pinch of the rice and ash mixture from the bag Arthur held out. With shaking hands, he gently opened the mouth of the first child and placed the mixture inside. He repeated the process with the second. The moment he was done, a collective gasp of pure terror ripped through the group. The two small bodies on the tarps began to convulse. Their backs arced violently, silently. It wasn't the twitching of life, but the grotesque, horrifying jerk of a puppet whose strings were pulled by an unseen monster. A thin trickle of dark, foul-smelling river water seeped from the corners of their closed eyes and mouths. It wasn't blood, but it was somehow worse. It was the river itself weeping from their bodies. One of the younger deputies, his nerve breaking, shone his flashlight directly on the boy's face. In a movement that defied all laws of nature, the small head swiveled on the ground, and two milky white eyes snapped open, staring directly at the deputy. The man screamed, a high, thin shriek of utter horror, dropped his flashlight, and scrambled backward, falling into the mud. Just as suddenly, the convulsions stopped. The bodies fell limp. The dark water ceased to flow. The unnatural silence returned, deeper and more profound than before. No one spoke. The deputies who had been brave enough to wade into the dark river now wouldn't go within 10 feet of the bodies. They waited in a state of shared shock until the county coroner arrived. Arthur went home, his clothes soaked with river water and mud, the smell of death and decay clinging to him. Helen was waiting up, her face etched with worry. "Arthur, my God, look at you. What happened? Did they find them?" "They found them," he said, his voice hollow as he walked past her toward the bathroom. He couldn't bring himself to say more. He stripped off his filthy clothes, stood under the shower for a long time, the hot water doing nothing to wash away the chill that had settled deep in his bones. Later, long after Helen had cried herself to sleep, Arthur stood by the bedroom window, looking out at the moonlit yard. He thought of Charlie, of the ritual, of the horrifying spectacle at the river. He thought of his own strength, the way he had run, the way he had taken command. He raised his hand, the one that always trembled. He held it in the moonlight. It was perfectly, unnaturally still. The familiar, deep ache in his shoulder from his old war wound was gone. A strange,
invigorating energy hummed through his veins. He felt stronger, clearer, and more alive than he had in 20 years. And that, more than anything else he had seen that night, was what truly terrified him.
The next morning, the sun rose with a defiant brightness, as if trying to bleach the memory of the previous night's horrors. The world put on a mask of normalcy. That afternoon, David returned, this time with his wife and their son, Leo. The moment they arrived, the little boy, a whirlwind of youthful energy, ran straight to his grandfather. "Grandpa!" Arthur caught him in a hug, the genuine, uncomplicated warmth of it, a balm on his weary soul. He felt the tremor in his hand try to return, but the strange new strength held it at bay. For a few hours, surrounded by the laughter of his family, he could almost believe that the night by the river had been nothing but a terrible dream.
As evening approached, a gentle rain began to fall. Arthur and Leo sat on the covered porch, watching the drops darken the wood. "Grandpa," Leo said, his voice small, "can you tell me a story, a real one, about the war?" Arthur put his arm around his grandson. "All right," he said, his voice growing quiet and distant. "I'll tell you about a lone soldier. His whole squad, they were caught in an ambush, pinned down. One by one he saw his friends fall, until it was just him. He was terrified, son, but he was more afraid of losing his country than he was of the enemy. When they came to check the bodies, he leaped out from where he was hiding. He fought like a cornered animal, taking down half their number before they finally got him. He gave his life, but he died a hero." As Arthur finished, he realized a tear was tracing a path through the wrinkles on his cheek. Leo, his eyes wide with a sorrowful understanding, reached up a small hand and wiped it away. "Don't cry, Grandpa. It's a sad story." Arthur forced a smile and pulled the boy into a tight hug. "Yeah, it is."
"Grandpa?" Leo suddenly whispered, pointing towards the yard. "There's someone standing out there in the rain." Arthur's blood ran cold. He peered into the gray, misty twilight, his eyes scanning the property line. He saw nothing but the dripping trees and the deepening gloom. "I don't see anyone, Leo." "He was right there," the boy insisted. "A man in an old army uniform." Then he shook his head. Maybe I was just seeing things." Arthur hugged him tighter. The boy's sensitivity, a chilling confirmation of the encroaching darkness.
Later that night, long after the family was asleep, Arthur sat in his rocking chair, unable to rest. As if summoned by his thoughts, a figure coalesced from the shadows near the fence. It was Charlie. "It's starting, Arthur," the static voice crackled in his mind. "I saw them tonight, a whole patrol. They're the ones who took those kids. They think the war is still going. They think this valley is enemy territory." "My God," Arthur breathed. "What do they want? To sow terror, to keep fighting. They're planning something bigger, at the old cemetery." He paused. "You're the only one who can stop them. I can guide you, but you have to be the one to fight." "How?" Arthur asked, his voice a hoarse whisper. "How do I fight ghosts?" "You prepare," Charlie said. "Tomorrow you need to get things. 4 pounds of rock salt, 48 new sticks of incense, 10 white candles, and most importantly, you need to find a mulberry tree. Cut 4 long straight branches, switches. Do you understand? Arthur looked at the spectral soldier, the friend he barely knew but trusted implicitly. He gave a single, resolute nod.
A scream from inside the house shattered the night. It was Leo. Arthur rushed inside to find the boy sitting bolt upright in bed, shaking, his eyes wide with terror. David and Helen were already there, trying to comfort him. "They had horrible faces, Grandpa," Leo cried, burying his face in Arthur's shirt. "Like monsters. They were holding people's heads under the water. They were laughing." The static voice entered Arthur's mind again.
The boy saw them. Their evil has touched him. Get an egg, Arthur, a fresh one from the coop. Roll it on his stomach, now.
"David, give him to me," Arthur said, taking control. He laid the shivering boy back on the bed. "Son, go to the kitchen. Get me a fresh egg out of the basket." "Dad, what are you doing? We should take him to the hospital." "Trust me," Arthur commanded. David, seeing the iron will in his father's eye, reluctantly obeyed. He returned with an egg. Arthur took it, pulled up Leo's pajama shirt, and began to roll the smooth, cool shell over the boy's stomach in slow circles. Gradually, Leo's shaking subsided. His breathing evened out. The terror faded from his eyes, replaced by a sleepy calm.
Helen, watching this strange folk remedy, accidentally knocked the egg from Arthur's hand. It fell to the floor and cracked open. The family stared in stunned silence. Spilling from the shell wasn't a normal yolk and white. It was a thick, swirling, tar-black substance that smoked with a foul, sulfurous odor. The physical proof of an invasive, otherworldly evil lay shattered on their floor.
The next evening, Arthur, armed with the items Charlie had requested, met him at the gates of the town's cemetery. As they walked among the leaning, weathered stones, Arthur finally had to ask the question that had been haunting him. "Charlie, what are you? How do you know all this?" Charlie stopped and turned. The eerie light that defined him seemed to dim. "Because I'm one of them, Arthur. A ghost." He told him everything. How he died peacefully in his bed a week ago, only to awaken in this valley, a place he'd fought in decades before. He explained that a benevolent presence had told him he had one final mission: to find Arthur Miller and help him fight the darkness that lingered here. Arthur felt a profound shock, followed by a strange, sorrowful acceptance. He wasn't afraid. He was standing with a brother in arms. "Then we'll finish this mission together," he said.
They worked quickly, creating a large circle of rock salt in a clearing. Arthur lit the candles and the 48 incense sticks, planting them along the perimeter. Just as they finished, the enemy appeared. A dozen of them, materializing from the ground mist, their forms twisted, their eyes glowing with malevolent light. They walked straight into the circle. "Now!" Charlie yelled. He kicked the salt line, closing the gap. The circle flared with a blue light, trapping the enraged spirits inside. "They can't cross it! Go, Arthur!"
Arthur, clutching 2 mulberry switches, became the soldier he once was. As the ghosts clawed at the barrier, he struck them. Each time a branch made contact, it sizzled, and the spirit recoiled as if burned. Inside the circle, Charlie engaged them, a spectral whirlwind of fists and fury. Suddenly, a panicked voice called out from the darkness,
Dad, what are you doing?
It was David. He'd followed his father, worried about his strange behavior. In his shock, he stumbled forward, his foot scuffing a wide gap in the salt line.
The barrier flickered and died. The ghosts were free. The leader, a hulking figure named Jorgensen, lunged not at Arthur, but at the terrified David, lifting him off the ground by his throat. Another ghost flew at Arthur, its claws extended. Charlie leaped in front of Arthur, taking the blow. His form flickered violently, like a dying light bulb.
Seeing his friend hurt and his son in peril, something in Arthur snapped. All the rage, all the grief, all the warrior spirit he had suppressed for 50 years erupted. "Get away from my son!" he roared. He charged forward, swinging the mulberry switches not like branches, but like sharpened blades. He struck the ghost holding David, and it dissolved with a shriek.
Charlie, seeing Arthur's charge, rallied. The two old soldiers, one living, one dead, stood back to back and fought their final battle. They were a whirlwind of righteous fury, a two-man army against a platoon of nightmares. One by one, the spirits of the lost patrol were vanquished, dissolving into dust and bitter memory.
Finally, only the leader, Jorgensen, remained. Arthur faced him, pointed the mulberry switch at his chest, and brought it down with all his remaining strength. The ghost let out a final, silent scream and evaporated into a million motes of white light.
Silence. The battle was over. Arthur turned to Charlie, his face filled with gratitude. "We did it," he breathed. Charlie smiled, and his form began to glow, brighter and brighter. "Thank you, Arthur." His voice was clear now, no static. At the far end of the cemetery, a brilliant, warm light opened up. Charlie turned towards it. "My war is finally over." He gave Arthur one last crisp salute and walked into the light, vanishing completely. 3 days later, Arthur Miller lay in a quiet hospital bed, lost in a deep, unresponsive coma. His family kept vigil, their faces a mixture of grief and confusion. The doctors had no explanation. His body had simply given out. He had expended all his life force, his final reserves of energy, in that one last fight.
He looked peaceful. In the depths of his silent dream, he was young again, walking through a sunlit field with the friends he had lost so long ago. His war, too, was finally over. On his lips, unseen by his weeping family, was the faintest trace of a contented smile. The soldier had come home.